Good afternoon. My name is Nikola Burazer, and I have the pleasure of being the moderator of today's panel discussion on economic relations between Serbia and Kosovo. Before we begin with the panel discussion and I give the word to the panelists, I would like to invite Mr. René Schle, Director of the Friedrich Ebersteting Office in Pristina, to give us his opening remarks.
Thank you, Nikola, and thank you very much for the kind introduction. On behalf of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, let me welcome you, viewers from near and far. Yet again, another online discussion, and I think a very timely one, that is. And I would like to welcome you to today's topic, which is, of course, the economic aspect of the Belgrade and Pristina dialogue. So if you allow just a few words from my side, why this is an important subject for the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, because the economic ties is for Social Democratic Foundation is one core issue, how you normalize relations between societies. And as such, if you look back on the economic relations between Kosovo and Serbia, you of course have to assess that they have been volatile during the years, and mainly reflecting the political agenda of both countries. And such was the case, for example, when Serbia advocated against Kosovo's international recognition, while Kosovo on the other side adopted a tariff on all goods coming from Serbia, so until March 2020. So we're seeing a lot of, despite CEFTA, we're seeing a lot of trade barriers and bilateral issues that, of course, reflect upon the economic cooperation in the wider region. And for today's discussion, what we would be interested in from our side is to see, okay, to what extent can the process that is ongoing right now can lead to a normalization of economical relations, but on the other side, how can an improving of the free movement of people, goods, and services lead to a more normalized relations among the society? So, what is the means? What are the ends? So, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. Yeah. As I said at the start, so we're also looking forward, of course, to have these kind of events in the future in a physical setting. But I would all the more thank now both a moderator, but also our experts for their availability and their expertise. And I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. And well, enjoy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schle. Let us now turn to our panelists today. Here with us, we have on Zoom Ms. Sitrime Dervisholi, trade expert and former CEFTA contact point in Pristina, Kosovo. And here on my left, Nenad Jurjevic, the advisor to the president of the Serbian Chamber of Commerce. Let us begin with one simple question. First, Nenad, let's turn to you. How do you see the state of economic relations and trade currently between Serbia and Kosovo, especially after the tariffs were abolished and things have returned more or less to normal, and of course, notwithstanding the pandemic?
Well, first, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks, Nikola, for moderating this event. Hello to the colleagues in Pristina. If you see the figures, we can be optimistic because the figures are really, how to say, optimistic, positive, recovering from the period of the tariffs, but also recovering from the period of COVID. And if you see that already in August 2021, both sides, Kosovo and Serbia, reached 80% of the annual trade which has been recorded in 2018, which was just the year before the tariffs have been imposed. However, the general atmosphere and general trend, I don't see positive, because the general atmosphere in comparison to the imminent period after the normalization process started with the Brussels agreements and all that like these 5 years until the tariffs have been introduced, in comparison to this period, we see a lot of negative trends, which is also causing the business community and companies to, how to say, be hesitant in expanding their exchanges between Serbia and Kosovo. And when I say expanding, I think expanding beyond pure trade. Trade is important, and it's bringing goods to the market, and it's how to say, enabling goods to be more competitive in respect to other goods, and so on and so forth. But any tendency to actually have joint ventures, to have impersonal business meetings, to work on moving the non-tariff barriers, to, how to say, support atmosphere of that is conducive to better business environment. All this is missing. So figures are, how to say, optimistic. We are happy to see that, but the general political climate that should, how to say, support this business environment is not as promising as it should be.
Can you shortly describe us what are the main reasons for this negative environment that exists? Is it because of the political relations between Serbia and Kosovo?
It's political dynamics. It's political dynamics that is not only, how to say, present now in the past couple of months or a year, but I think that things went pretty much down, if I can call it that way, after in the period when the open discussion about the change of the normalization process started, and namely that according to me started when there were hints about the agreements in respect to exchange of territories, about the final solution that will entail ethnically based changing of boundaries. And that is the period when the political, how to say, discussions and the atmosphere on the ground and, how to say, distrust went up. And then we had all various so-called incidents or kind of developments on the ground that didn't help basically continuation of the business environment as we started to have. Those events evolved into then having the tariffs imposed, which completely stalled and frozen the economic cooperation. And then we remember that all these dynamics with the elections in Serbia, elections in Kosovo, big words simply did not contribute to the business environment. We were, before 2018, we were very active, for instance, in bringing a business community and companies to Serbia and to the fairs, also bringing Serbian companies to the fairs in Pristina. There are some companies even considering to do joint venture in various areas, especially in dairy products production, but that was also stopped due to the completely, how say, blocked, I would say, process of a dialogue, technical dialogue also that was meant to solve some issues of the certificates that is not solved yet. So, for instance, you cannot sell or invest in the area of dairy products, milk, cheese. You cannot, for instance, trade in that, meat products. All this was how to say, that area is, you cannot do it legally. So from basically 2017, 18 until today, we are seeing this deterioration of the political climate that is simply not conducive for the business development.
Thank you very much, Nenad. Ms. Dervisholi, how do things look like from your perspective? How do you see the economic relations and trade between Serbia and Kosovo?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to speak about the, let's say, maybe one of the most important things in the region currently. And also greetings for my colleague Mr. Nenad, with whom we had different cases to meet in regional fora. Maybe let me start first just to give you kind of introduction. Where do Kosovo stands on economic development, and to come, let's say, very quick to the economic relations between Kosovo and Serbia. In general, Kosovo is an open economy. The index of openness, which relates a country's exports and imports to its GDP, hovers around 90% during the last 3 years, ending in 2020. So around 20 percentage points higher compared to 2008. So gradually, Kosovo's economy opening itself, progressive liberalization in goods and also in services. So in 2020, trading in goods, both exports and imports, represented around 55% of Kosovo's GDP, while trade in services constituted around 35% of GDP. Kosovo is also part of the CEFTA agreement, but a cross-country assessment with CEFTA countries conducted by the Economist Intelligence Unit 3 years ago reveals that Kosovo utilizes only 37.9% of its export potential in goods and services based on the main drivers of trade potential, like Kosovo's level of development, its size and distance with key markets. So in this respect, Kosovo is the worst performer among the Western Balkan countries. Moreover, a World Bank study, which also relies on the fundamental determinants of predicting exports, shows that Kosovo can increase its goods exports by 80% from its current base, suggesting that it performs well below its estimated potential. So this shows there is a lot or enough room, enough space to improve economic relations and trade relations between Kosovo and Serbia. And unfortunately, different nature of barriers, tariff, non-tariff barriers, are hindering the economic development of both countries, especially in this case, Kosovo as a small economy. So in my opinion, there is a lot to do between two countries, between two, let's say, economies that has potential to do more. Especially, I'm again emphasizing Kosovo because of these figures that I already just provided, that we, let's say, can do more between ourselves. And fortunately or luckily, I used to be a CEFTA contact point for Kosovo and also trade component point for within the common regional market. And also from my experience and from my perspective, I saw that sometimes even the smallest technical issues during the CEFTA meetings especially, somehow tended to transform into political issues, which this do not contribute to the development of this region and also to the advancement of this region, having in mind that our final goal of both countries, of all Western Balkan countries, is that one day to join the EU.
Thank you. Let me ask you one more thing. How important of a trade partner is Serbia for Kosovo in comparison to some other Western Balkan countries? How big is this trade for Kosovo and how important it is for Kosovo?
Yeah, I mean, telling these figures, Kosovo shows that it's very much dependent on imports from different countries and also here including Serbia. During my time, when I was part of the CEFTA agreement, we have made some calculations 2 years ago, and the figures showed that Serbia contributes to overall Kosovo's imports only 3 up to 4%. So as a small country, I mean, as a small market, of course, that Serbian, let's say, market for Kosovo is important because the distance is very, let's say, it's very short and close to arrive to Serbian market, and contrary, also from Serbia to arrive to Kosovo market. But looking to the figures, Serbian market or Serbian products in Kosovo, Serbian imports, is consisted only 3 up to 4%.
Thank you. And Nenad, from Serbian perspective, how big is this trade? How important it is for Serbian businesses and for Serbian economy in general?
Well, potentially it is important as any market. And as Mr. Dervisholi said, due to the distance, due to the, I would say also knowing each other, having the also ties from former Yugoslavia, many of the also, how to say, infrastructure is connected. So due to all this, and then also habits or people habits to relate to certain products from Serbia, and that they can purchase, or I think quality price. All this brings about that there is a close relations and potential is big for cooperation. Before, how to say, the tariffs, I would say that we almost reached, the trade between Serbia and Kosovo almost reached €500 million annually, almost 470 million euros was the exchange of 2017. For that, you can also calculate probably a certain amount, not as it was before, but certain percentage of still gray market economy. So that potential is big for the, how to say, size of Kosovo. For instance, in the first 9 months of 2021, the exchange was 322 million euros between Serbia and Kosovo, which saw a big surge. I mean, both Kosovo raised its export to Serbia and Serbia to Kosovo, despite many of the non-tariff barriers and despite of all this kind of atmosphere that I described initially. But if you see the tendency on a global level, let's say, and I think that is also important to say, because there is many statements coming from both sides, but more recently from Kosovo government, how Serbia is taking is monopolizing its position in certain area. Certain products are sold at dumping prices, which is not true in Kosovo market. So if you see the, how to say, the trend in Serbia and in Kosovo in respect to the exchange to the bigger blocks, and the bigger blocks is for Serbia is basically EU, and then the second point is CEFTA. And it's a similar trend in Kosovo. First exchange partner for export and import is countries from the EU, and the second is CEFTA. So those trends are similar. But what is how to say? What is the unused potential? Is that there are areas like energy, like management of environmental projects, like agriculture, that our companies can do together if the environment is different, and also then can, how to say, can grow in size, and can also as such be kind of a local player, if not bigger player in the EU, but at least can be a local player. There is a big exchange and big potential for exchange between Serbia and Albania, and between Kosovo and Albania. So our companies were also looking for Albanian market as a potentially good market for joint ventures between Serbia and Kosovo companies to go to Albanian market. But I mean, all these, how to say, chances are squandered currently because of the political dynamics. And also the infrastructure that we see is not conducive to the bigger development. All, how to say, transport goes along the roads, which brings, it's more expensive than railway. The railway that is existing and that would need some kind of, how to say, maybe technical repair of a couple of months and not a big amount of money to be put in use between, that will link Pristina, Mitrovica, Raška, then Kraljevo, and then either Belgrade or Luka or Port of Bar, is not in use. We were trying as a Chamber of Commerce of both sides and cargo companies of Kosovo and from Serbia to present the case that this route would be, how to say, open or rehabilitated in certain distance, because there needs some works in the northern part of Kosovo for it to be able to be used. So all this is currently just stalled and not used. So potential is not only trade, potential is in joint ventures and in also, how to say, being players in various kind of markets, not only between Serbia and Kosovo, but also in the region. But the situation is unfortunate as it is, and if you follow the pace of the discussions in Brussels of this EU facilitated dialogue, I'm not an optimist of that the things will be unblocked in a foreseeable future.
I have the impression that basically there is not much attention of the public to this issue of economic cooperation and trade between Serbia and Kosovo, and it only arises when there is a problem, like, for example, the tariffs. When the tariffs were introduced, then we have seen the analysis of the increase of prices in Kosovo, of limited exports of some Serbian companies, etc. So do you share this opinion? And basically, this is completely neglected, basically, if there are no, let's say, blockades in that regard.
No, that is true. And I think that basically the tariffs and this, how to say, seizing of the trade between Serbia and Kosovo were the biggest victim of the stalled process of normalization, because I think the process of normalization was so much visible in trade, in economic relations, because after the first agreement on normalization and then other agreements on a technical level that enabled legally execution of business, if you can say it this way, you see the boom. You see what this normalization really means. And if you wanted to how to say, to stop it in a way, or to send some political message, you simply, how to say, you stop something which is functioning. You cannot stop something which doesn't function. And what is functioning is this, actually, business exchange, economic growth, with all this brings about also new employments and so on and so forth. So, and of course that is not, I mean, yes, as you rightfully said, it's not the news when things are normal. But also with the business people, companies, they don't want to be on a spotlight. They don't want to have like public eyes on them, and they are very hesitant in really going out and publicly, I don't know, promoting or speaking about their business. I mean, they would like to have an environment which supports them what they can do. And what we saw with for instance, with the tariffs, is that the most companies that were hit in Serbia by the tariffs were small and medium enterprises, 2, 3 employees, 5, up to 10, who actually couldn't wait for so long to how to say, have some accumulation, to wait to find some other way, some other market, or other way to place their goods on Kosovo market. Big multinational companies that are present in Serbia, that have their own sister companies around the region, in Albania, in Macedonia, in Montenegro, they found a way to also send their shipments and to avoid the tariffs. But the small companies couldn't. And that's, I think, something which is first they were first hit from Serbian side, but also from Kosovo side, companies that are that were importing actually commodities like, I don't know, wheat, flour, soya, other commodities from Serbia, because it's closest market, good prices, have a history of business relations positive. They suddenly had to turn to some other markets, which are much further from Kosovo, physically, distance-wise, to oblige to certain long-term contracts without knowing that if tomorrow tariffs will be abolished, then they are tied to contracts with an unfavorable price. So that also caused, as you noted, a raise of prices in Kosovo for the final goods, because 52 or 55% of the export from Serbia to Kosovo is either raw material or material that will be used for further elaboration, for further production, to produce the final product, which means that is supporting also Kosovo economy, because you are having a quality with affordable price material that then you use and you fabricate the new one. So just want to depict how, I mean, how things were very much linked. But yes, in public sphere, that's not something which you really, how to say, you hear, because it's not, how to say, it's not good for populistic gains. Mm-hmm. Probably.
And speaking of the links, how do you see the role of the chambers of commerce in improving this economic cooperation and trade? We have seen several initiatives of the chambers of commerce in recent years, from the establishment of this Western Balkans Chamber Investment Framework to the agreement or declaration after the Washington Agreement about supporting further improving actually economic cooperation. How do you see the results of this cooperation between the chambers of commerce, and do you think that the chambers of commerce could have a bigger role to play?
Well, the result is that actually I think the most important result is that our contacts and the contacts we created among us as a chambers, but also that we enabled between businesses, never stopped, never ceased, irrespectively to the tariffs, to the ups and downs in a political dynamics. Those ties haven't stopped. Our regional Western Balkan Chamber Investment Forum is live and operating, still advocating for the how to say stronger and deeper regional economic relations in the Balkans, working with the governments to harmonize their relations in various areas in order to abolish completely non-tariff barriers among all the countries, working on digitalization, dual education, and so on and so forth. So from this point of view, I mean, we can say that we are satisfied. We managed to maintain the same level of contacts, or by being aware how difficult it is for each of the chamber to navigate in these circumstances. From 2014-15, our chambers were active in bringing sides together, for instance, the various governmental agencies, ministries, and to enable harmonization of 45 various certificates that were harmonized between the two sides, which enabled free trade of good in those areas. We were also very active in bringing railway companies, postal companies, and even to discuss about air traffic, all back in 2015. But we were not successful in these three fields, because those three areas have been taken or decided to be considered by the negotiators in Brussels, by the technical, within the technical dialogue, and until today we still don't have those issues resolved. I think that, if the chambers can play a bigger role, the chambers can play the role in terms of showing and demonstrating that collaboration is possible, that the if you think on a practical level and how to advance the relations, you can always find a solution. We can also, our experience can be good also, I think, for the official formal dialogue in Brussels. I believe that also through our network, some of the solutions could be challenged or double-checked. We are able to reach the other side, I would say, in a way that will not hamper the formal process. So from this point of view, I think that the chamber dialogue or the chamber relations are, I think, unused treasure in a way. But we are aware that the main decision makers and the main process is somewhere else, and we are doing our best to influence it, how much as we can, and either through the Euro chambers or through the various regional initiatives. But what I see as a negative in the past 6 months or so is that there is some kind of a wariness by our partners in Pristina, in Kosovo, to have business delegations coming to Kosovo because of the business environment in Kosovo. Mm-hmm. And that's something which is not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ms. Dervisholi, what do you see as the chances? How could economic cooperation be improved, having in mind these political relations and the ongoing dialogue process? Is it the chambers of commerce that can play a larger role? Are there some other ways to improve economic relations despite all the political problems? What is your opinion about this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer in the benefits of free trade and regional economic integration. But however, trade and economic integration has to be regionally inclusive and not affected by measures with political objectives. Of course, that chambers can do a lot in establishing and improving the economic relationship between two countries, because I think political things we have to leave to politicians. And it's sometimes painful that Kosovo businesses experience, let's say, very, I would say, funny barriers in different borders, let's say, border crossing points with Serbia. And thus also, as you may know, Kosovo cannot export or import freely if its trade in transit passes through Serbia, because Serbia requires all transit in trade destined to Kosovo to comply with its national export and import obligations, because according to Serbian authorities, they do consider Kosovo as their internal territory, so as their territorial part. For example, this means that, let's say, an Austrian or German or Hungarian exporter to Kosovo to fulfill all Serbian national standards and certificates, including paying the connected fees and charges in Serbia, if these operators want to use transport corridors via Serbia. Of course, that there is a lot of potential between two countries. And as we know, two countries are very good and very much developed on trade and services sectors. And unfortunately, a process that started in 2018 about the mutual recognition of professional qualifications has stalled. So yet, we are at the end of the year 2021, and yet we do not have an agreement about the mutual recognition of professional qualifications and how, let's say, our services providers can freely provide these services in our respective countries. As a landlocked country, I mean, using roads, let's say, are still most cost-efficient transport mode in doing trade with Kosovo. As we all may know, there are different, let's say, measures that are hindering trade between two countries. For example, trucks having Kosovo license plates are not allowed to enter Serbia. Insurance policies are not accepted. Kosovo exports certificates nor compliance with Kosovo standards in imports and exports are not recognized by Serbia. So, in my opinion, regional cooperation and especially good neighborly relations are key elements in the EU accession process, not only for Kosovo and Serbia, but for all Western Balkan countries, and most importantly, for the attraction of foreign direct investments. I remember for quite some time that Western Balkan countries, CEFTA countries, let's say, engaged themselves to make or to draft kind of an offer as a region for FDIs. But unfortunately, I mean, this document or this initiative never happened in practice, or never came into life, better to say. Despite, let's say, these issues, these barriers, for example, in my personal experience, I used to be part of the initiative Green Corridor. And this is one of the initiatives that wherever I go or wherever I speak, I want to promote, because it's one of the, let's say, of the rarest experiences or practices that functioned between Kosovo and Serbia. During the pandemic, this initiative was established or was issued for the first time with the support of CEFTA, RCC, and Transport Community Treaty, in order to facilitate the transport and trade of goods, especially for the essential goods. And despite some, let's say, issues in the beginning of this Green Corridor initiative, the initiative was successful in its implementation. And even nowadays, the initiative is still, let's say, still active, still contributing to the best of the region. So this, I mean, despite that barriers, issues, we have, let's say, some good examples, but unfortunately, these are not enough examples, because there is a lot of potential to do. Only we have to, let's say, not to transform technical issues into political issues, like this region knows to do very well, unfortunately.
Well, let's come back to the RCC and the regional cooperation initiatives a bit later, but let me ask you this. There is an impression, from what I've heard from both of you, is basically that economic relations are in a way of hostage of the dialogue which takes place in Brussels, and all the problems which occurred due to the problems in the dialogue then reflect on economic relations. Are there any other channels that might be used to improve economic cooperation, leaving the dialogue aside, like, for example, through the dialogue between the chambers of commerce or through CEFTA as a regional initiative, etc.? Is there an opportunity to push forward something, leaving completely the political dialogue aside?
Yeah, I mean, we have tried. When we say we, I mean to Kosovo and Serbia. We have tried not only these two countries, but also as region, as Western Balkan countries. First, we have tried, let's say, with CEFTA agreement, and it didn't function in its full potential, like all of us, and especially Kosovo, expected to gain benefits from this trade agreement. Then we have tried with Transport Community Treaty, which both Kosovo and Serbia are signatory parties of this treaty. Even this treaty or agreement is not functioned in its full potential, because, as I mentioned before, we are having problems or barriers in transport. Again, I mean, we have tried with regional economic area through a multi-annual action plan, the so-called document. which document, let's say, contains different pillars, different issues such as trade, services, digitalization, etc. And then the last, let's say, mean or tool is common regional market. So, however, we have tried in different ways. I remember very well also the cooperation between Kosovo Chamber of Commerce and Serbian Chamber of Commerce, bringing delegation here, also delegations from Kosovo going to Serbia, to Belgrade. But again, I'm afraid to say that we are so very much entrenched into political issues, and the political issues between Kosovo and Serbia have seriously conspired against all these regional integration efforts. And if this wouldn't be, let's say, addressed with some sense of urgency, none of these initiatives will be successful. I had the chance to be also part of the delegation of Kosovo into dialogue last year in 3 rounds of dialogue on economic and trade cooperation. But I have to say this, that I haven't seen, unfortunately, readiness and willingness from Serbian delegation to conclude the agreement, because we made, let's say, kind of framework of document, but then this document never achieved to get the final, let's say, the final approval. So I don't want to, let's say, to sound pessimistic, but I'm afraid that without having political soul or solution to this issue, to the problem that we are speaking to, I'm afraid that these kind of barriers will be existing even, let's say, even after today.
Thank you. I have the impression we always come back to the question of political will as some kind of a magical thing that doesn't really, we know it exists, but we don't see it in practice. The regional cooperation initiatives, we have the mini Schengen initiative as something which is the center of attention in recent years, but we also had the regional economic area, and I have the common regional market, so initiatives from through the Berlin process, which are supported by RCC. Did we see any concrete results in these initiatives, and do you expect that we will see something coming out of it? Is there political will to actually achieve meaningful results? What is blocking this process?
I think the first thing that blocks this process, if you say from a political point of view, is the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, Serbia, Kosovo. And that's something which is kind of really the first or the biggest hurdle in many aspects. And it's completely, how to say, catching or kidnapping the dynamics of and the meetings of the various levels, I would say. Another thing that I think that should be mentioned is also the scope and the maybe I would say an ambition with which all these documents have been created. Various versions of MAPREA first, now it's Common Regional Market, is basically some kind of a list of, I don't know, 105 priorities. I mean, it's also kind of a oxymoron to have 100 priorities. You cannot have it, but 105 action points signed or supported in Trieste. Then after that, with this Common Regional Market was like, I don't know, in Poznan. I think that is somehow doesn't really reflect the basic needs of the economies and of countries, and doesn't reflect the reality where they are in. somehow all the interlocutors, be it the governments who signed those documents, be it the interlocutors, which is like, and endorsers, like European Commission, then RCC, somehow everybody is playing along the line of some inertia. Yes, we're going to sign this, it's a lot of good intentions, but if you see how it is structured, it's almost impossible to implement it that way. For it to be implemented, even half of it, you need a very strong commitment from regional governments to work on implementation, namely to have dedicated administration led by a political figures or figure who is, how to say, has a clout, and they work on a weekly basis on its implementation. And that is not the case now. So you have a mixture of political unwillingness, I would say, somehow some kind of bureaucratic and administrative inertia, that, you know, some things need to be done just a month before any summit. You have a kind of a commotion in the capitals, in Brussels or in a host country. What are deliverables for this summit? Then they put something, and I think that things doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. We in Serbian chamber for a number of years proposed that this methodology should change. We every year for the Berlin summit, we used to publish so-called position paper on the state of the economic relations in the region for the summit, and we were always calling to change the paradigm of enlargement in economic point of view. We think that bigger responsibility need to put on the governments, that governments need to, how to say, somehow recognize what are the really interests of them, and we need also kind of an open, how to say, expression of, by the third parties, by the Commission, by the member states, who is and why the processes are stalled. Currently, I think we have, everybody knows everything, but it's kind of put within some kind of a paradigm of business as usual. Meetings are taking place, but not agreements are there. And you can feel that on the ground. Companies feel this, business people feel that, and at the end of the day, the processes are stalled. You mentioned mini Schengen. It's now changed its name in Open Balkans.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Well, it's important if they're going to do something, not how they're going to call it. If you see the declarations with which has been founded or started 2 years ago, I think there is a kind of a willingness of the leaders to, by themselves, initiate or use the situation as, not to use, but okay, to initiate something which will be under their control in a way. But the commitments that they made and the agreements that they had, they're all within the framework of CEFTA Protocol 5 or other CEFTA or CRM, but they are more focused. They are more focused on these 4 freedoms of economic liberties and less on some other issues that are equally important, but I would say they are more kind of broader. If they are going to be successful, that will, I think, can give a bit additional impetus for maybe others to join. And for the other players like European Commission and the RCC to seek changing the methodology of, how to say, or even of CEFTA, to change the methodology of what has been done so far, of this kind of framework of integration and cooperation. You cannot every time go with some new ideas and leaving the old agreements behind, even if they're not fulfilled. We are probably at some point that somebody needs to be named what is blocking whom and how and why. And based on that, I guess the dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade can be supportive to it, because currently we see that many things are, at the end of the day, bring us to, okay, I can call it colloquially, to the Lytrak's office, that are even not meant as a framework for normalization, but regional dynamics or regional relations are hostage to these dynamics. So I would say somebody really needs to see those activities or those initiatives as complementary, and to look the process as complementary, and to basically understand that blocking the normalization process is not only blocking Serbia and Kosovo, but it's also blocking the regional cooperation as such. And I think that that's something which should be worrisome to everyone included, not only at local level, but also at the international level, meaning European Union member states and others.
But there is an impression that the governments are pretty interested in this regional economic cooperation. We see the governments of Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia being really vocal about the importance of the Open Balkan Initiative. We know that Kosovo is not in favor of the Open Balkan Initiative, but it's also advocating for integrating through the common regional market. So there is an impression that the governments are quite interested in these initiatives, but then we don't see it practically that's developed on the ground. And also one other thing, what happened to the Washington Agreement? Is this something which is already forgotten, or it had some consequences, or will have some consequences in practice? What is your opinion?
Well, Washington Agreement is, yeah, it's there. I mean, maybe we should ask our colleagues in Washington, D.C. about it. I know
they
that
say that it matters to them, but it doesn't really feel like that in practice.
But if you see the, how to say, I'll just look at the economic, let's say, points in it.
Exactly.
We can comment other points. It's a very unusual document in terms of substance. But if you see the economic points there, it's basically more or less the same priorities, the same criteria that fell under the so-called economic normalization under the EU facilitated dialogue. So working on the opening of the railway service, air, opening the air service between Pristina and Belgrade, opening of the border crossing in Merdare, which actually happened. We have to say that due to this also pressure, Serbian side decided to move to the very physically this small barracks or whatever it is called facility at Merdare. The research on joint usage of Gazivode Lake and of the river Ibar has been made. We were positive about that, because not going in the substance of the research, because there are many questions about it. But we saw, for instance, Gazivode Lake as a development potential for both sides, because Gazivode is definitely on both sides of border boundary, call it as you wish, Serbia and Kosovo. And you need joint management of those resources in order to have the full capacity, to use the full capacity of the resource. So this could be the case study of joint management and willingness to cooperate. Unfortunately, it has been read in a different way. Everybody, it's mine, it's not yours. And mine. So shared sovereignty, if you can call it like that, over Gazivode can be a good example of bringing things closer. And that's something which, okay, it was mentioned in the Washington Agreement. So what is the future of the very document? I cannot say. But what I can say is that if you want to seek solutions for current problems that we are all aware of and that Mr. Dervisholi rightfully mentioned, I think you also need for some creative way how you put things on the paper. Everybody was criticizing the Washington Agreement for its form, right? Agreements, because there are two documents. But if you see the first agreement on normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina in 2013, I don't see a different form. I saw that document with the title and bullet points, right? and the signatory of the parties who said, we certify this is it. And at that time, European Union was happy about the form. But while they were very critical about the form in Washington, because, okay, we know that by they're critical, there are different political issues behind it. But if we find a way how to use the form not to obstacle us, then we are on the winning side. But currently, the form is used to block everything. And I mean, the form saying, how do we call Kosovo? Is there an asterisk or not? How many times asterisk is in the document or not? If the footnote and academic work can contain a Republic of Kosovo or border or anything in it or not, when it is quoted, and all these bizarre things that are completely keeping us backward. And I think that's wrong. So if Open Balkan Initiative can have this kind of a positive thinking to use the forum for having a first agreement, Brussels agreement based model of agreeing on things, or Washington model of agreeing on things, and then implementing those agreements in respective countries or economies, however they want to call it, I would be happy about that, because that can bring about positive development. And I understand there is a lot of questions and a lot of doubts about it, because why Open Balkan, not CRM, and so on and so forth. But maybe also looking the format sometimes is also useful, because of the reason that I explained before.
Thank you. And Ms. Dervisholi, what do you see as the main potential benefits of these regional cooperation initiatives, and what do you think could be done to push things forward, to basically move past these obstacles, including on how to name it, or what is different between one and the other? How do we solve this, and how do we move forward? Sound.
Yeah. To be honest, the new initiatives do not differ so much with CEFTA agreement. I would say that most of the things, 90% of the things, are already in the CEFTA agreement. And we already know let's say, the experience of Kosovo, but not only Kosovo, the whole region. Let's say how much we have managed to benefit from this agreement. So to be honest, I mean, as I previously stated, that there is a lot of potential, not only between Kosovo and Serbia, to, let's say, to extract good things that are within the initiatives, within the agreements, existing agreements. But again, if there is no progress really in the political area in the region, certainly there will be innumerable hurdles that could frustrate any progress towards the expected results from the existed initiatives and initiatives that might happen in the future. So in the current situation, a politically realistic solution is needed, and any solution which doesn't change the legal situation will be of no benefit for the whole region.
And for example, what do you see as the main issue with the Open Balkan initiative from Kosovo's perspective? We have heard so much about this initiative, and there's so much talk about Kosovo joining, not joining. You know, Washington Agreement states that it will join, and the Kurtis government says it will not. What do you think is the main reason for Kosovo's objection to this initiative, unlike, for example, the CRM?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, from what I have followed different, let's say, professional political discussions here in Kosovo, in Pristina, there is one very, let's say, one main concern, I would say, amongst the others. But the main one is that, for example, this new initiative, or the old one, mini Schengen, now Open Balkan, there is no inclusiveness in the agreement, and this is where the problems start. if not all the countries, all the, let's say, actors are not seated on the table to discuss about the current and future agenda of trade, of economic, or any other issues that relates to this region, even me personally, I do see a very serious problem. An agreement has to be always a win-win situation. In that moment where you feel yourself, or you do see yourself, let's say, out of that kind of initiative, I mean, of course, that you do not feel very much comfortable to continue further with any kind of activities or engagements. So inclusiveness, I would, let's say that is the main concern of the politicians here, but also different professional forums that we have discussed, let's say, in many different events here in Pristina.
A remark myself, I always found it interesting to see that for the mini Schengen or the Open Balkan Initiative, there is always this talk about it is in the interest of the other side. For example, in Serbia, we often hear that it is the project of Greater Albania. In Kosovo, we hear that it's a project of Greater Serbia. We also hear sometimes similar messages coming from Montenegro and Bosnia and Herzegovina, etc. And no such messages were ever sent regarding other similar cooperation initiatives which are under the Berlin process. Would you say that maybe there is just a lack of a mutual trust between the governments in the region, where they're just not able to push something which is coming from below, that we actually need somebody from let's say above, meaning the European Union, to push these initiatives for them to actually be accepted by everybody? Is this what we can see from this whole issue with the Open Balkan? What is your opinion about this?
Yes, also it could be, let's say, lack of trust between governments, having in mind, let's say, the past experiences. This lack of trust could also derive in this case. And of course, I mean, again, I have to mention, I mean, the political climate in the region, the political situation between Kosovo and Serbia. The dialogue that has stalled currently. I mean, all these contributes, unfortunately, to create this kind of picture. And also, of course, that EU is one of the, let's say, of the main players in the field. And in my opinion, I mean, it has to be, the EU has to be more, let's say, to put more pressure on both sides in this case, in order to move towards to the dialogue. But in the other side, having, I mean, seeing the results from that year when the dialogue started, 2011, until now, honestly, I can mention, let's say, only few, let's say, achievements that happened thanks to the dialogue. But nobody expected that for 10 years period of time of the dialogue process, we will find ourselves now, I mean, in this position that we are currently as both countries. So, even I mean, after this, I'm afraid that we will use, let's say, political justifications to not let move this region forward. But of course, that in this case, especially the EU has to be more active in order to push countries to be, let's say, to be more serious in implementation of these commitments that they have taken through Brussels agreements, different Brussels agreements, and not only for the agreement on regional representation and cooperation that was achieved in Brussels that Mr. Nenad mentioned regarding this agreement of 2013.
Well, thank you very much. Nana, the same question for you. Well, let's conclude with this. Do you believe that basically there is no trust in the region, that we actually need the EU to push forward any initiatives?
I don't know. I mean, there is a bit disappointment, I would say. In various countries have different reasons for disappointment. How to say, if you see how European Union has been created and what are the steps and activities that they did from 1985 to 1992 in order to create a single market, those steps were completely different than how they are been doing now with this common regional market. It was a very much politically initiated and very strongly monitored process of harmonization of legislation in areas basically of 4 freedoms. So if there is a lack of trust, well, maybe. I think it's a bit of disappointment, but I think also what is very bad is that the European Union is used as a punching bag for all the local elites or local political groups or governments to vent their frustrations on various levels. And I would say that, yes, you can be disappointed by the EU in many aspects, but I think also what is more important is actually your own ability to govern. It's also about governance. Are you able to deliver on something that you took as obligations or not? And that's also, how to say, puts you as a credible partner for any other contracts in the future. So this is also something which, unfortunately, our governments don't look that way. And so it's easier to point to a third side.
Well, thank you very much. To conclude very, very briefly, I think we can say that economic cooperation is important. There is a lot of potential, but there are also a lot of problems on the ground that are hindering progress, and they need to be addressed in the future in the interest of both economies. Well, thank you very much to our panelists for joining us today, and of course, thanks to all of you who have watched this discussion. Goodbye, and see you in some other opportunity.